Hello everybody, I am Abby Elizabeth and this is the Earthen Vessels YouTube channel. This channel is for Christian women, but anyone is welcome to listen. So this is the second video in a series about marriage, and the title of this video will be What is and is not a wife? Because these days, of course, many women have no idea what a wife is. Many men, as a matter of fact, don't know what a wife is and is not. So, first of all, what a wife is not. A wife is not a queen. She is not a girlfriend. She is not a hot mess. She is not a prostitute. She is not a business partner. And she is not the mother of her husband. So, let's go over these principles briefly. A queen is someone who is a woman who has rulership over a kingdom of some kind. So a godly wife is not a queen. She is someone who recognizes that her husband is in authority. So she's not a queen. She's not her husband's girlfriend. So she has a very highly valued role that is beyond just being kind of female companionship. And we're going to go into that in more depth in just a moment. She is not a hot mess. Well, what do I mean by that? I mean that a woman who is married to a man is in subjection to him. So her emotions do not rule the household. They don't rule him, and they don't rule her either. Because what happens when a woman is in the proper subjection to a godly man, if she's upset about something and she confides in her husband, she will then listen to his counsel and consciously decide not to let her emotions get the better of her. So, for example, if a woman is very upset, say, about something that a friend of hers is doing, she goes to her husband and she says, my friend is doing this, and I'm just so freaked out and upset about it. And if her husband says to her, your friend is immature, and your friend is actually in disobedience, and I think that for a season it would be better if you just didn't spend a lot of time with that particular friend, because that young lady is in need of getting her own life in order, and for you to be preoccupied with that is something that I just don't want. I don't want you to be upset like this, and I also don't want you spending your time with someone who is in that kind of rebellion. A woman who is in proper subjection would say to her husband, I see what you mean. I am keeping company with someone who's a bad influence on me, so I will cease doing that. Thank you very much, my husband, for your guidance. And so this is how a woman, when she listens to what her husband tells her, that then she is no longer controlled by feelings of upsetness, feelings of fear, feelings of envy, all kinds of things that can prey upon her mind. When she goes to her husband with respect and says, my husband, this is happening for me, that a good husband will listen to her, but then tell her how to continue in order to not be so upset. And so part of being in subjection is being in emotional subjection. So a wife is not a hot mess, always causing all kinds of upsetness in the home and freaking out about this or that. She is in emotional subjection to her husband's guidance. She is also not this man's mother. So she does not tell her husband, for example, that he needs to take out the garbage or else. This is not the way a godly wife treats her husband. If it's too heavy for her to carry, then she could ask him respectfully to carry it outside for her. But, in general, part of the proper relationship between a wife and a husband is one where the woman is the servant to the husband and not the other way around. So when we have children as mothers, we can tell them, for example, to take the garbage out. And if they don't do so, our husband can enforce what we told that child to do. But we don't treat our husband like our children. He is not one of our children. And hopefully we married a man who behaves like a man and not like a child. But even if we did marry a man that acts like a child, we don't treat him as such. That's not going to help that situation. So another thing that a wife is not, is a whore. In other words, she dresses modestly, and she conducts herself in such a way as that her chastity is without question. So she doesn't hang around with men who are not her husband. She does not have private phone conversations with men who are not her husband. She does not respect other men as she respects her husband. She has a husband, and the primary man in her life is him. So she does not emotionally congregate with other men, and she dresses modestly. The other thing about chastity is that she conducts herself with grace and humility in social situations. So, for example, if a wife and a husband are going to a church gathering together, she does not make him wait for her when it's time to leave. She realizes that in her role that she is following him. And one thing about a whore or a prostitute is that they tend to make their own ideas, their own beauty, their own ideas about how they speak and act to be what they do. So it's their own idea of what's right. A wife doesn't act that way. So when we are Christian sisters, and we're married to a godly man, we don't act that way. We act like a wife and not like a whore. So if our husband tells us that a certain dress that we've put on is not modest, we change it or we put something over it so it becomes modest. If our husband tells us that it's time to leave a certain social gathering, we very quickly gather up our belongings and the children and we leave with him. It is a whore who will behave in a different way. A whore who will say, "Oh, no, I like this dress and I'm going to wear it today." That would be the behavior of a whore. It would also be the behavior of a whore when her husband says that we need to leave this situation right now, for the wife to say to him, "Oh, no, I want to stay and talk to my girlfriends. You go on ahead. You take the children, but I'm staying here." That is also the behavior of a whore. A wife is in subjection. And for that reason, we want to understand that as women, what it is that we're getting into if we get married. If we don't want to do that, then we shouldn't get married, because we're going to bring much unhappiness into our husband's life as well as our own by causing constant discord and argument. Another thing that a wife is not is a business partner. So, for example, when a husband and wife decide to purchase a home, ultimately the husband decides on home. The wife might say, I like this house because the kitchen is adequate for my needs. She can give input into his decision, but she needs to honor his decision. They're also not business partners in that they have an equal say in how the money is spent. A woman is under the headship of her husband, and he is the ultimate one who decides how the money should be spent. So the woman might be allocated a certain amount for food for the family in order for her to purchase what is needed so that she can prepare good food for the family. It's up to her to be wise with what has been given to her in the amount that her husband gives her. If she feels that it's not an adequate amount, she should approach him respectfully about that and say, "My husband, when you have an opportunity, there's a matter concerning the household that I'd like to ask you about. And when he sits down with her, he has time to see what it is that she's presenting to him. She says to him, you know, food prices have gone way up. I can no longer really adequately provide for the family's needs on what you've given me. I would like this much more. And then he can either say yes or no. And she needs to respect that. You see, as the administrator of the family's finances, he knows how much they have, and he knows whether or not they can afford to spend more in that area. And if he says, I'm sorry, my dear, we are just going to have to make ends meet the way it is now. I want to, I understand what you're saying, and I wish I could give you more, but at this moment I cannot. And then the woman would bring herself into subjection to that and do the best she can with what he gives her. You see, a woman is someone a wife is someone who would want to be a good custodian of the things her husband gives to her to be administrator over. So if he gives her a certain amount of money, say for the children's clothing, then she would do her very best to get that clothing for the children in the cheapest possible way, where they're adequately clothed, but she's using the money wisely. This is the same thing with her own clothing. Women do not, who are godly women, don't go to their husband and say, I need a new dress right now, and if I don't have it, you can sleep on the couch until I have it. This is the behavior, again, of a whore, and not the behavior of a wife. Now, there are many principles about being a godly wife, and briefly, I want to go over what they are. They are modesty, humility, grace, wisdom, kindness, and subjection. So these are all character attributes that a godly woman would have in marriage. Let's go to 1 Peter. Let's read in chapter 3 and verse 1. Likewise, you wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also may, without the word, be won by the conversation of the wives. So this is speaking about how a wife, whether or not her husband is in the faith, should be in subjection to him. And it also is very clear that if a man is not in the faith, so he doesn't obey the word of God, that a woman who is married to such a man does not preach the word to him, but by her conduct, she and her chaste conversation, that is what draws him to want to obey the word. So a Christian woman who obeys the word does not exalt herself as a teacher to her husband who is yet not in the faith. Rather, she conducts herself in respect towards him and subjection to him, and she keeps her own conversation chaste. And that example would be the thing that would win her husband to the faith without the word. And this is very important. Women are not teachers of men. And women, if their husband is an unbeliever or not in the faith, that doesn't mean that now she can exalt herself as a teacher to him. And if she does so, it will not bear good fruit. First of all, men will not receive it from a woman who is their wife, because that's out of order. It's out of God's order for men and women. Whether or not someone is a believer or in the faith has nothing to do with it. If a man and a woman are married, and the woman starts to instruct the man as a teacher about things from the Word of God, that will not work. And he will not only will he not be able to hear it, but it will put in his heart a condition of rebellion against that word. If a wife is in the faith of Jesus Christ and been baptized in his name and filled with the Holy Ghost, and she's married to an unbelieving man, she doesn't preach the word to him. she lives as a Christian lives, and part of that for women is to be in subjection to her own husband. And if he is curious about the word, she would then direct him to a man of God who can teach him. So now let's read in verse 2. While they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear. So chaste conversation means that we treat our husband with respect and that we honor him. And in so doing, that our husband would behold that, and that would draw them to the word. So now let's read about modesty in verse 3. Whose adorning, let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting the hair and of wearing of gold or of putting on of apparel. So here we can see that a woman's dress should be modest and simple, that her hair should be simple, and of course if she's praying or prophesying, her hair should be covered. Because a woman's beauty is something that is kind of like a hot coal. We have to be careful with it. It's not intended to be presented to the whole world. Our beauty is for our husband. So when we are married to a man, we should keep our beauty something that is private, something that is for him. And also we want to dress simply and modestly. We don't decorate ourselves with jewelry, and we don't put on fancy clothing that is worn to attract the attention of people in the world. So especially when a godly woman, a godly wife, goes out into the world, she is dressed modestly so that she is not presenting herself as an attractive woman to the world. Rather, her beauty is something that should be kept private and between herself and her husband. And then we read in verse 4 about some of the character attributes. But let it be the hidden man of the heart, in that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit which is in the sight of God of great price. So a meek and quiet spirit. What is that? Well, that is someone who, a wife, who would be very eager to please her husband, very teachable, very willing to do whatever he asks. And of course, this is what a Christian is in relationship to Jesus Christ. So when we are disciples of Jesus Christ, man or woman, in relationship to him, we are meek, we are teachable, we are humble, we ask him for what we have need of. We treat Jesus Christ with respect. And this is how a godly wife treats her husband. And then we read in verse 6, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters ye are, as long as ye do well and are not afraid with any amazement. So what does it mean to be afraid with amazement? That is when a woman's emotions take over for her, and she is unwilling to let go of them. You see, when we encounter in ourselves as women fear and the kinds of things like, for example, the things that are coming in the earth, if we go to our husband and we say, you know, there's going to be an EMP, and so I think we should spend a lot of money right now building a bunker and storing food and getting guns and so forth because I'm afraid, that this is being afraid with amazement. Rather, a godly woman would go to her husband and she would say, you know, these times are very troubling to me. I'm very frightened, my husband. What can we do so the family is safe? But she needs to trust his guidance and his decisions. Because otherwise, what will happen is that their whole family will become ruled by her fear rather than morally guided by the man's righteous judgment. And the husband is better equipped to righteously judge whether or not it's a good idea to build a bunker and store up all kinds of food and so forth. And a godly wife would treat her husband as Lord. In other words, she would go to him and she would say, my husband, I'm frightened. What can we do? And then when he tells her what to do, then she does it. So when we call our husband Lord or Sir, these are terms of respect. It is not at all to mean that we are giving him a fancy title. This is simply to be respectful, much like we might expect our children to call us ma'am. So children should be taught how to respect the father and mother. So the father in a family, in an American family, might be referred to as sir by the children, and the mother might be referred to as ma'am. So the mother might say to the child, you need to pick up your toys and put them away. Yes, ma'am. It is the proper response. And of course, we want to teach our children these things. But when a husband says, my wife, I'm not going to build a bunker. We're going to rely on the Lord for our provision in these times, and we're not building a bunker right now. Her response to him should be, yes, sir, I understand. And this is the same thing as saying, yes, Lord. And again, this relationship is the relationship of Jesus Christ and the church. So as Christians, we don't say, when we're praying, say, for example, we don't ask the Lord to provide for us a certain thing. So perhaps something that we think we should have. So maybe we think we should move to a new location and have a house. So we ask God to provide that for us and our family. And if God doesn't provide that for us, we don't throw a tantrum. We don't reject God. We don't say, well, God doesn't love me because he didn't give me what I wanted. Rather, we trust him. As Christians, we follow Jesus Christ. And as godly women, if we're married, we follow our husband. So now let's go to the book of Proverbs, chapter 31. And I'm not going to go over this whole chapter right now, and I might revisit this later. But for now, I want to read in verse 26 and through 28. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. So women are not stupid creatures, and we do have much to offer a husband. When we open our mouth, we want it to be with wisdom. So, for example, there's a situation perhaps in the church community where we live, and our husband is about to make a decision that will impact other people in that particular body. We might open our mouth and say something that might inform his decision. For example, we might say, well, that particular couple there, they're really struggling because they haven't had a child, and they're very preoccupied with that, my husband. So I do realize that you make the decision here, and I'm just telling you this so that maybe you would take that into account, not to maybe judge this brother too harshly, because he's under a lot of stress right now because of this condition. You see, this is opening one's mouth with wisdom. But again, as a godly woman, we would respect whatever it is our husband decided to do, because our role is to inform and not to usurp authority. So she openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. So a godly woman, a godly wife, would take care that her mouth be used to serve this law of kindness, and not gossip, not bring all kinds of ill will and ill tidings to her husband all the time. Rather, to try to measure her words according to the standard of, is it kind? Is what I'm presenting in my mouth under the law of kindness? Or am I speaking evil of people just because I happen to be upset today? And of course, a godly woman does not go about in the community spreading rumors about what's happening in her household. And she is loyal to her husband, so her mouth is guarded. She uses discretion in her language. What she speaks to the world is seasoned with salt. So it's seasoned with wisdom. And the things that she says to people about her home, she realizes that she doesn't want to speak things that might tear down her own house. So we have to be careful with our words. And one way that women can act with wisdom in this respect is to adhere to the law of kindness. If we're saying something about someone, then we want to be careful not to speak in such a way as to injure them. And even when maybe pointing out a difficulty, to do so as kindly as possible. So then we read in verse 27, she looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. So a godly woman is diligent in her service to the household, that she's an able cook. She creates a peaceful atmosphere. The house is clean and orderly. The children are clean and orderly. And the finances that her husband trusts her with are well maintained, and that she's very diligent and quite prudent when it comes to managing those things. She is an asset to her husband and not a liability. And I'm going to say much more about that in the next videos that are after this, but for now we want to say that a godly wife is not idle, that there are many things that women have forgotten how to do. And those things are about administering a household, about preparing healthy food, about caring for the children, teaching the children how to read the Word of God, teaching the children the difference between right and wrong, how to respect their father, how to respect us, how to be valuable members of the household and contribute. All of these things and many more are in the domain of the woman. And when we are in rebellion and out in the workforce, we are not doing these things. And when these things are left unattended or attended to by the government or by strangers, much unhappiness then ensues. So in Christian marriage, the role of women is extremely important. And we do not marry a man so that he will be out working and bringing home money, and we sit on the couch and watch YouTube all day. Rather, we are diligent in his service to take responsibility for the things that a godly wife is ordained to have responsibility over: the house, the children, the food, these and the clothing. These are things that are ordained for the woman to do. We eat not the bread of idleness. So this is what a godly wife is. There is much more, and I'm going to cover more about this in later videos. But I pray that at least we have laid a foundation here about what it is that we want to prepare for as women if we are desirous of being in a marriage. What we would want to look for in a husband, and the kind of characteristics that we would want to cultivate in ourselves. In the next videos, I'll be talking about some of the specific skills that a godly woman would want to have when she's considering marriage. I hope this message has been a blessing to you. Feel free to comment in the comment section below, or to email me if you have further questions.